My business partner of 40 years tried to steal my company by claiming I was too old to understand modern business. But what he didn't know was that I had kept one crucial document from 1983 that would change everything and show him exactly how sharp this 71-year-old mind still was. My name is Anthony Castellano, and at 71 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal the business world could offer. I was wrong. The deepest cut came from the person I trusted most, my business partner and childhood friend, Marcus Wellington, the man I had built an empire with, brick by brick, contract by contract, over 4 decades of shared dreams and mutual respect. Or so I believed, until that gray October morning when everything I thought I knew about loyalty and friendship crumbled like poorly mixed concrete. It started innocently enough, as these things always do. Marcus called me at 7:30 a.m., his voice carrying that artificial cheerfulness that I had learned to recognize as a warning sign after 40 years of partnership in Wellington Castellano Construction. "Tony, we need to talk today. Can you come to the office around 10? There was something in his tone, a careful distance that hadn't been there the week before when we had celebrated landing the Morrison Hotel renovation contract, a $12 million project that would keep our crews busy through next summer. I arrived at our headquarters in Greenwich precisely at 10, parking my Mercedes in the spot that had been mine since we bought this building in 1987. The receptionist, Sandra, who had been with us for 15 years, wouldn't meet my eyes as I walked past her desk toward the executive floor. That should have been my second warning, but I attributed her behavior to the Monday morning blues that seemed to affect half our staff after weekend breaks. Marcus was waiting in his office, but he wasn't alone. Sitting across from his mahogany desk was his son Derek, 38 years old, Harvard MBA, and the biggest mistake we had ever made in our hiring practices. Derek had joined the company 3 years ago, ostensibly to help modernize our operations and prepare for the digital transformation that every construction company was supposedly required to undergo. What he had actually done was create divisiveness among our management team, questioned every decision that Marcus and I made based on our 40 years of experience, and somehow convinced his father that the company needed younger leadership to remain competitive. "Tony, sit down," Marcus said, gesturing toward the chair next to Derek. The formality was jarring. For 40 years, our meetings had started with coffee, stories about our families, discussions about weekend golf games or fishing trips. This felt like a board meeting with strangers. Derek opened a leather portfolio and pulled out several documents, spreading them across the desk with the methodical precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "Anthony, we need to discuss the future direction of Wellington Castellano Construction. The industry is changing rapidly, and we need to make some difficult decisions about leadership structure." I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to shut down whatever corporate nonsense his son was about to present. But Marcus was studying his hands, avoiding eye contact. That's when I realized this wasn't Derek's initiative. This was a planned intervention, and my partner of 40 years was actively participating in whatever ambush they had prepared. "What kind of decisions?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the growing alarm in my chest. Derek smiled, the kind of patronizing expression that consultants use when explaining obvious concepts to stubborn clients. "The construction industry is becoming increasingly technology-driven. Our clients expect digital project management, real-time cost tracking, integrated supply chain solutions, and sustainable building practices that require specialized knowledge. We need leadership that understands these modern requirements." I had heard this speech before, variations of it during Derek's first year with the company, when he had tried to convince us to spend $300,000 on project management software that would have replaced systems that had worked perfectly for decades. Marcus and I had politely declined, explaining that our clients hired us because we delivered projects on time and under budget, not because we had the latest technology. "And you think I don't understand modern requirements?" I asked. "Tony, please don't take this personally," Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying a rehearsed quality that suggested they had practiced this conversation. "You're 71 years old. You've given this company 40 years of incredible service, and you deserve to enjoy retirement without the stress of adapting to an industry that's changing faster than any of us anticipated." Retirement. The word hung in the air like dust from a demolished building. I stared at my partner, the man who had been best man at my wedding, who had held my hand during my wife's funeral 5 years ago, who had celebrated every major contract and commiserated over every setback we had encountered together. "I'm not ready for retirement, Marcus. We just landed the Morrison project. The Riverside development is entering phase 2. We have more work than we've had in years." Derek leaned forward, his expression shifting to what he probably thought was sympathetic understanding. "That's exactly the problem, Anthony. These projects require modern management approaches that, frankly, someone from your generation might find challenging to adapt to. The Morrison project alone involves sustainable materials sourcing, LEED certification requirements, and integrated digital monitoring systems." "I've been managing construction projects since before you were born," I replied, feeling heat rising in my cheeks. "I built this company from nothing when my father and I started with one truck and a shared dream. I think I can handle whatever requirements the Morrison project demands." "Can you?" Derek's question was direct, almost aggressive. "When was the last time you used our project management software? Do you understand the environmental compliance regulations that went into effect last year? Are you familiar with the new safety monitoring systems that OSHA requires on projects over $10 million? Each question was designed to expose gaps in my technical knowledge, and Derek had chosen his examples carefully. I could manage any construction project through experience and practical knowledge, but I hadn't bothered learning the specific software programs that Derek had insisted we implement. Environmental compliance and safety monitoring had always been handled by our specialists, not by executives.
Marcus cleared his throat, a sound that had preceded important announcements for 40 years. "Tony, we've prepared an offer that we think is fair. Derek has been analyzing our company valuation, and we're prepared to buy out your 50% stake for $2.8 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. Our company was worth at least $20 million in assets alone. The Morrison contract would generate $12 million in revenue over the next 18 months. Our equipment yard housed machinery worth $8 million. The building we sat in was valued at $3.2 million. They were offering me roughly 14 cents on every dollar my half of the company was actually worth. $2.8 million? I managed to say. Derek nodded enthusiastically, as if he were presenting me with a generous gift. "It's a fair market evaluation based on current industry conditions and projected performance. Plus, you'd be free from all operational responsibilities and liability exposure. At your age, that peace of mind is probably worth more than additional money." At your age. The phrase was becoming a refrain, a polite way of suggesting that I was too old to contribute meaningfully to the company I had spent 4 decades building. I looked around Marcus's office, seeing framed photos of projects we had completed together. The Greenwich Country Club renovation that had established our reputation for luxury work. The Harbor Point residential development that had made us millionaires. The St. Catherine's Hospital expansion that had won us the Connecticut Construction Excellence Award 3 years running. "What happens if I refuse the offer?" I asked. Marcus and Derek exchanged glances, another rehearsed moment in their carefully choreographed presentation. Marcus spoke first. "Tony, I hope it doesn't come to that. We've been friends for most of our lives. I want this transition to be smooth and respectful." "But if I refuse?" Derek opened another folder, revealing documents I recognized as corporate bylaws and partnership agreements. Our partnership agreement includes provisions for resolving disputes over company direction. If you can't adapt to the operational requirements that our contracts demand, the board of directors has the authority to restructure executive responsibilities. Board of directors? We had created that board 10 years ago for tax and liability purposes, never imagining it would become a weapon used against one of the company's founders. The board consisted of 5 members: Marcus, Derek, myself, our company attorney, James Morrison, and our accountant, Patricia Chen. In a dispute between Marcus and myself, the outcome would depend on how Derek influenced the other 3. "You've already talked to Morrison and Chen." I read the confidence in Derek's expression. "We've discussed the situation," Marcus admitted. "James and Patricia agree that the company needs clearer leadership direction, especially given the complexity of our current projects." I was being systematically isolated, surrounded by people who had decided my contributions were no longer valuable. The realization was devastating, not because of the financial implications, but because it represented the complete destruction of relationships I had believed were unbreakable. "I need time to consider your offer," I said, standing up from the chair. "Of course," Marcus replied. "Take all the time you need. But Tony, please understand that this decision isn't personal. It's about positioning the company for long-term success." I walked out of that office feeling older than my 71 years old, but also feeling something else that surprised me. A cold, calculating anger that I hadn't experienced since my Army days in Vietnam. They thought they could manipulate me into accepting their insulting offer because I was too old to fight back. They had forgotten that age brings not just physical limitations, but also cunning, patience, and the kind of strategic thinking that comes from surviving 70 decades of challenges. The drive home to my house in Greenwich took 20 minutes, but I used that time to begin formulating a response that would remind Marcus and his ambitious son exactly who they were dealing with. Anthony Castellano hadn't built a multi-million-dollar construction company by accepting defeat gracefully. I had succeeded by outthinking competitors, by finding advantages that others missed, and by never underestimating the value of preparation and patience. My house sits on 2 acres overlooking Long Island Sound, a colonial-style home that my wife and I had purchased in 1992 when the company's success first allowed us to afford luxury. Elena had died 5 years ago after a brief battle with cancer, leaving me alone in rooms that had once echoed with her laughter and the voices of our children during holiday gatherings. Our son Michael lived in California with his family, visiting twice a year and calling every Sunday with updates about his software consulting business and his 3 children. Our daughter Sarah lived in Boston, where she worked as a pediatric nurse and called twice a week to check on my health and remind me to eat properly. Both children had occasionally suggested that I consider retirement, but their suggestions came from love and concern for my well-being, not from calculated attempts to steal my life's work. I poured myself 3 fingers of Macallan 18, a ritual that Elena and I had shared every evening before dinner, and sat in my study surrounded by 40 years of memories, awards, and documentation from Wellington Castellano Construction. The walls held framed photographs of groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, and celebration dinners marking major project completions. There were commendations from the Greenwich Chamber of Commerce, letters of appreciation from satisfied clients, and industry awards recognizing our craftsmanship and reliability. But it was the filing cabinet in the corner, the one that Elena had always teased me about because I refused to throw away old paperwork, that held the key to my response to Marcus and Derek's attempted coup. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Partnership Agreement, Original 1983, a document that I had kept despite our lawyer's recommendations to discard outdated paperwork after each agreement revision. The partnership agreement that Marcus and Derek were relying on for their board authority had been revised 4 times over the decades, most recently in 2019 when Derek joined the company and we restructured our corporate governance. But there was something in that original 1983 agreement that subsequent revisions had never explicitly addressed, a clause that Elena had suggested I include when we first formalized our partnership with Marcus. Elena had been an accountant before we married, with a sharp eye for legal details that could become important years later. She had insisted that our original partnership agreement include a founder's protection clause that would prevent either original partner from being involuntarily removed from active management without just cause related to criminal activity, mental incapacity, or gross negligence resulting in significant financial losses. The clause had seemed unnecessary in 1983 when Marcus and I were young men building a business based on mutual trust and shared ambition, but Elena had been adamant. "Tony, business partnerships are like marriages," she had said. "You never think you'll need a prenuptial agreement until circumstances change and you discover that love doesn't always survive financial pressure or personal ambition." I spent the next 2 hours reviewing every revision of our partnership agreement, tracing how subsequent versions had modified various clauses, but had never explicitly repealed the founder's protection provision. Our lawyers had assumed that newer versions automatically superseded older clauses, but contract law doesn't work that way when specific provisions aren't directly addressed in subsequent agreements. If I was reading the legal language correctly, Derek's board authority was limited by the founder's protection clause, which meant they couldn't force me out without proving just cause through a formal legal process. Moreover, any attempt to dilute my authority or reduce my operational control without my consent would constitute a violation of the original partnership terms, potentially voiding the entire corporate structure and reverting ownership to the original 50-50 split between Marcus and myself. It was a legal technicality that could stop their takeover attempt, but it was also a nuclear option that would likely destroy our friendship and force a public battle that would damage the company's reputation. Part of me hoped that Marcus would come to his senses and realize that Derek was manipulating him into betraying 40 years of partnership and friendship. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated and dismissed as too old to contribute to my own company, wanted to show them exactly how dangerous it was to underestimate someone with 4 decades of business experience and a burning desire for justice. I called our original attorney, Harold Brennan, who had helped us establish the partnership in 1983 and had remained our personal legal counsel even after we started using Morrison & Associates for corporate matters. Harold was 81 years old, officially retired, but still sharp enough to provide insight into legal strategies that younger attorneys might miss. "Anthony," Harold's voice carried the warmth of 40 decades of friendship and professional collaboration. "I haven't heard from you in months. How you holding up?" I explained the situation, reading him relevant portions of both the original and current partnership agreements. Harold listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification about specific clauses or recent corporate decisions. "Tony, this is interesting," Harold said after I finished my explanation. "The founder's protection clause was Elena's idea, wasn't it? She always had excellent instincts about potential legal complications. Can we use it to stop what they're trying to do?" "Potentially, yes, but you need to understand the implications. If you invoke the Founder's Protection Clause, you'll be challenging the validity of 4 subsequent agreement revisions. That could create legal chaos that benefits no one, including you. Courts don't like partnership disputes, and judges tend to encourage settlements rather than litigation. What do you recommend?" Harold was quiet for several seconds, thinking through the strategic implications. "Before we consider legal action, I think you should give Marcus an opportunity to reconsider his position. He might be getting bad advice from his son, or he might be feeling pressured into decisions that he doesn't fully support. 40 years of friendship at least deserves one honest conversation before we start filing motions. And if he won't reconsider, then we remind him that underestimating Anthony Castellano has always been a costly mistake. I hung up feeling better than I had since walking out of Marcus's office that morning. I had options. I had legal protections that they didn't know about. And I had something that Derek's Harvard MBA didn't teach him to value: the patience and cunning that comes from 7 decades of surviving challenges by outthinking opponents who assumed age meant weakness. I spent 2 hours photographing every relevant document, creating a comprehensive digital record that would support my legal position if circumstances required formal action. I also reviewed our current project files, payroll records, and financial statements, gathering evidence of my continued active involvement in company operations despite Derek's claims about my obsolescence. The Morrison Hotel project file was particularly interesting. I had personally negotiated the contract terms, supervised the initial site surveys, and approved the construction timeline that Derek was now claiming required modern management expertise beyond my capabilities. The client contact notes showed my direct involvement in resolving design challenges and budget adjustments that Derek hadn't even known about. By 8:30 a.m., I had assembled a complete picture of my contributions to current company operations, documentation that would demolish Derek's argument about my inability to handle modern projects. I was still photographing documents when Sandra arrived and found me in the records office. "Mr. Castellano, you're here early," she said, her voice carrying the same uncomfortable tension I had noticed the day before. "Just catching up on some paperwork, Sandra. How long have you been with us now? 15 years? 16 next month." She hesitated, clearly wanting to say something but uncertain about the appropriateness. "Mr. Castellano, I hope everything is okay. There have been rumors about changes in company leadership." Rumors? That confirmed what I had suspected. Derek and Marcus had been discussing their plans with other people, probably preparing the staff for my departure before they had even presented their offer to me. It was another indication of how thoroughly they had planned this ambush. "What kind of rumors, Sandra?" "People are saying that you might be retiring soon, that Mr. Derek is going to take over day-to-day operations. Some of the project managers are worried about job security if there are major changes." Interesting. Derek's reputation among our operational staff wasn't as positive as he probably believed. Construction workers and project managers respect competence and experience more than academic credentials, and Derek had never demonstrated the practical knowledge that earned trust on job sites. "Sandra, I want you to know that I'm not planning to retire anytime soon. Whatever changes might happen in company leadership, I'll make sure our employees are protected." She smiled with obvious relief. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano. You and Mr. Marcus built something special here, and a lot of us are hoping it stays that way." I left the office at 9:15 a.m., before Marcus and Derek arrived, with a memory card full of documentation and a growing sense of confidence about my strategic position. They had made several crucial mistakes in their planning. They had underestimated my legal protections, they had overestimated their support among company employees, and they had failed to consider how my systematic documentation of company operations would contradict their claims about my capabilities. But most importantly, they had forgotten that Anthony Castellano had spent 4 decades succeeding in a brutally competitive industry by being more prepared, more patient, and more cunning than opponents who underestimated him because of age, background, or assumptions about his capabilities. That afternoon, I called Marcus and asked to meet him for dinner at Giuseppe's, the Italian restaurant where we had celebrated every major contract signing for the past 20 years. I wanted this conversation to happen on neutral ground, away from Derek's influence, in a place that held 4 decades of shared memories. Marcus arrived first, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact as the hostess seated us at our usual table in the corner booth. He ordered his standard Chianti, but his hands were shaking slightly as he reached for the wine glass. "Tony, I'm glad you called," he said, after we had ordered our meals. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I want you to know that this isn't easy for me." "Then why are you doing it, Marcus? We've been partners for 40 years. We've built something incredible together. Why are you letting Derek convince you to destroy that?" Marcus stared into his wine glass, his voice barely audible when he finally responded. "Because I'm scared, Tony. I'm 73 years old, and I don't understand half of what our clients are demanding these days. Derek speaks their language in ways that we never learned. Maybe we are too old for this business." The admission was heartbreaking because it revealed how deeply Derek had manipulated his father's confidence. Marcus Wellington was one of the sharpest businessmen I had ever known, capable of reading clients, negotiating complex contracts, and managing million-dollar projects with intuitive skill that no MBA program could teach. Derek had systematically undermined that confidence, convincing his father that experience and wisdom were liabilities rather than assets. "Marcus, we just landed the Morrison contract by doing exactly what we've always done, understanding what the client really needs and delivering superior results at competitive prices. That doesn't require new technology or younger leadership. It requires the kind of judgment that comes from 4 decades of success." But Derek says,
Derek says a lot of things, I interrupted. But what has Derek actually accomplished? What projects has he successfully managed? What clients has he brought to the company? What problems has he solved that we couldn't handle ourselves? Marcus looked up from his wine glass, meeting my eyes for the first time since we had sat down. There was confusion there, and doubt, as if he were questioning assumptions that had seemed certain yesterday. Derek has the education and the technical knowledge that modern construction requires, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus, we built a multi-million-dollar company without MBAs or technical knowledge. We succeeded because we understood people, because we delivered what we promised, and because we adapted to every challenge the industry presented. Those skills don't become obsolete when you turn 70. I leaned forward, speaking with the intensity of someone fighting for 4 decades of friendship and partnership. Derek is using your love for him and your concern about aging to manipulate you into giving him something he hasn't earned. He's not trying to modernize our company, he's trying to steal it. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing what I had said. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone reconsidering fundamental assumptions. "Tony, what are you asking me to do? Derek is my son. I want him to succeed. I want him to have opportunities that I never had. I'm asking you to remember who we are and what we built together. If Derek wants opportunities in this industry, let him earn them the way we did, by starting small, learning the business from the ground up, and proving himself through results. Don't give him our life's work as an inheritance he hasn't earned." The waiter brought our meals, but neither of us touched our food. The conversation had reached a crucial point, and I could see Marcus wrestling with competing loyalties, his love for his son versus his respect for our partnership, his fear of becoming obsolete versus his pride in what we had accomplished together. "What do you propose?" Marcus asked, finally. "Withdraw the buyout offer. Tell Derek that we're not ready to retire and that he needs to earn his position in this company through performance, not politics. Give him real responsibilities on actual projects and let him prove himself through results. And if he succeeds, then he'll have earned advancement the right way, and we'll all benefit from his contributions. But if he fails, you'll know that your instincts about the value of experience were correct." Marcus picked up his fork and took a bite of his chicken parmigiana, chewing slowly while he considered my proposal. "Tony, Derek won't like this. He's expecting to take over operational control within the next few months.
Derek's expectations aren't the issue, Marcus. The question is whether you're going to let him destroy 40 years of partnership because he's convinced you that age makes us irrelevant. I need to think about this. This is more complicated than Derek made it seem. I reached across the table and placed my hand on Marcus's arm, a gesture of friendship that carried 4 decades of shared history. Marcus, I'm not asking you to choose between Derek and me. I'm asking you to choose between what's right and what's convenient. Derek will have plenty of opportunities to prove himself if he's willing to work for them. But if you let him steal our life's work now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. We finished our meal in contemplative silence, both of us recognizing that our conversation had changed the dynamic of whatever Derek had planned. Marcus left the restaurant promising to reconsider the situation, but I could see uncertainty in his eyes, the kind of doubt that comes from realizing that simple solutions to complex problems usually aren't simple at all. I drove home knowing that I had planted seeds of doubt about Derek's motives, but also knowing that one conversation wasn't enough to counter months of manipulation. Derek would fight back when he realized that his father was wavering, and his counterattack would probably be more aggressive than his initial approach. That night I sat in my study with the original partnership agreement, reading Elena's Founder's Protection Clause one more time. She had been right about the importance of legal protections in business partnerships. She had also been right about something else she used to say. Tony, the most dangerous opponents are the ones who underestimate your intelligence and assume that age makes you weak. Those people always reveal their plans too early and leave themselves vulnerable to counterattacks they never see coming. Derek had revealed his plans, shown his strategies, and demonstrated exactly how he intended to steal my life's work. Now it was time to show him what a real strategist could accomplish when properly motivated. The next morning, I received a call from James Morrison, our corporate attorney, requesting a meeting to discuss partnership restructuring options. His tone was carefully neutral, but the timing wasn't coincidental. Derek was clearly mobilizing his support among our board members, probably presenting them with the same arguments about aging and obsolescence that he had used on his father. I agreed to meet Morrison that afternoon, but first I called Harold Brennan and asked him to attend the meeting as my personal counsel. If Derek wanted to turn this into a formal legal confrontation, I would make sure I had representation that understood both the history of our partnership and the strategic implications of the Founder's Protection Clause. The meeting took place in Morrison's conference room, a sterile environment designed to intimidate clients into accepting whatever legal advice they were paying for.
Every scenario involved reducing my role in company operations while increasing Derek's authority and compensation. The language was carefully crafted to sound reasonable and forward-thinking, but the ultimate goal was obvious, legitimizing the transfer of power that Derek had been orchestrating. Harold listened to Morrison's presentation without interruption, occasionally taking notes but giving no indication of his thoughts about the proposed changes. When Morrison finished his presentation, Harold opened his briefcase and pulled out copies of our original partnership agreement. "James, this is interesting," Harold said, in the deceptively casual tone that I remembered from decades of legal negotiations. "You're proposing significant changes to Anthony's operational authority, but I don't see any reference to the Founder's Protection Clause that was included in the original partnership agreement." Morrison's expression shifted from professional confidence to confusion. "I'm not familiar with that clause, Harold. Our working documents are based on the 2019 agreement revision." "Of course, but the Founder's Protection Clause was never explicitly repealed in subsequent revisions, which means it remains legally binding under Connecticut partnership law." Harold distributed copies of the relevant pages to everyone in the room. This clause specifically prohibits involuntary changes to either founding partner's operational authority without just cause related to criminal activity, mental incapacity, or gross negligence resulting in significant financial losses. Morrison spent several minutes reading the clause, his expression becoming increasingly concerned as he recognized the legal implications. Harold, this complicates the restructuring scenarios significantly. If this clause is still legally binding, then any attempt to reduce Anthony's authority without his consent would constitute breach of partnership contract, potentially voiding the entire corporate structure and reverting to original ownership terms. Harold's voice remained casual, but his words carried the weight of legal authority that Morrison couldn't dismiss. The room fell silent as Morrison processed the implications of what Harold had presented. All of Derek's carefully planned restructuring scenarios were based on board authority that might not legally exist if the Founders' Protection Clause remained binding. "I'll need time to research this thoroughly," Morrison said. "This could significantly impact our recommended approach to succession planning." Harold smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just played a winning card that their opponents hadn't seen coming. "Of course, James. Take all the time you need, but I think you'll find that Anthony's position is considerably stronger than anyone realized." We left Morrison's office with the legal momentum clearly shifted in my favor, but I knew that Derek wouldn't accept the setback gracefully. His next move would probably be more aggressive, more personal, and potentially more dangerous to everyone involved. That evening, Derek called me directly for the first time since joining the company. His voice carried barely controlled anger when he spoke. "Anthony, I understand you've been researching old partnership agreements with Harold Brennan. I think we need to have a conversation about what you're trying to accomplish." "I'm trying to protect my rights as a founding partner, Derek. Your restructuring plans ignore legal protections that have been in place for 40 years. Those protections were never intended to prevent natural succession planning. You're using technicalities to obstruct progress that benefits everyone, including yourself. I'm using legal rights that your father and I established when we built this company. If you want authority in this business, earn it through performance, not through manipulation of board votes and legal loopholes." Derek's voice became colder, more calculating. "Anthony, I've been trying to handle this situation respectfully because of your history with my father. But if you force a legal confrontation, you might not like the outcome. Age-related competency challenges can be very unpleasant for everyone involved." The threat was unmistakable. If I continued to resist his takeover attempt, Derek was prepared to question my mental competency, probably supported by carefully selected examples of age-related mistakes or confusion. It was a vicious strategy that would humiliate me personally while legitimizing his claims about the need for younger leadership. "Anthony, I've been dealing with threats from people much more dangerous than you since before you were born. If you want to question my competency, bring evidence that will hold up in court. But remember that competency challenges work both ways, and your track record in this industry won't withstand the kind of scrutiny that legal challenges require." I hung up knowing that Derek had just escalated our conflict beyond the possibility of peaceful resolution. He was prepared to destroy my reputation and personal dignity to steal my company, which meant I had to be equally prepared to defend myself through whatever methods were necessary. But Derek had made another crucial mistake in threatening me directly. He had confirmed that this wasn't about company modernization or succession planning. This was about greed, ambition, and the kind of personal ruthlessness that destroys families and friendships. Elena used to say that you could judge someone's character by how they treated people who couldn't fight back. Derek's threat to use age-related competency challenges revealed exactly what kind of person he really was. Someone who would exploit their opponent's vulnerabilities without concern for dignity, friendship, or family relationships. Now I knew I was dealing with an enemy, not just a business competitor. And enemies required different strategies than I had been considering.
The phone call with Derek had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. His threat to use age-related competency challenges revealed the true nature of his character and confirmed what I had begun to suspect. This wasn't about modernizing the company or preparing for succession. This was about a calculating, ambitious young man who was willing to destroy everything his father and I had built in order to steal what he hadn't earned. That night I sat in my study until 2 a.m., not dwelling on Derek's threats, but planning something that would demonstrate exactly how dangerous it was to underestimate Anthony Castellano. Elena used to tell me that my greatest strength wasn't my construction expertise or business acumen. It was my ability to see 10 moves ahead while my opponents were still planning their next step. Derek had revealed his entire strategy, shown me all his weapons, and given me time to prepare a response that would leave him completely defenseless. By morning, I had developed a plan that would accomplish 3 objectives: protect my legal position, expose Derek's incompetence to everyone who mattered, and remind Marcus why our partnership had succeeded for 40 years. It would require patience, precise timing, and the kind of strategic thinking that Derek's Harvard MBA hadn't prepared him to recognize or counter. I started by calling Patricia Chen, our company accountant and board member, requesting a private meeting to discuss what I called concerns about financial irregularities in recent project management. Patricia had been handling our books for 12 years, long enough to understand the difference between normal operational expenses and questionable financial decisions. We met at her office in downtown Greenwich, a neutral location where she would feel comfortable speaking freely about company matters. Patricia was a methodical woman in her 50s, someone who approached business relationships with professional caution and avoided taking sides in personality conflicts. "Anthony, what kind of irregularities are you concerned about?" she asked, opening a notepad to document our conversation. I pulled out a folder containing copies of expense reports and budget modifications that Derek had authorized over the past 6 months. "Patricia, I've been reviewing project expenses for our current contracts, and I'm seeing cost overruns and vendor payments that don't align with established procedures." She studied the documents I had provided, her expression becoming increasingly concerned as she recognized patterns that violated the financial controls we had established years ago. Derek had been authorizing expenses without proper approval procedures, approving vendor contracts without competitive bidding, and modifying project budgets without board oversight. "Anthony, some of these expenses are questionable, but they might have reasonable explanations. Have you discussed these concerns with Derek directly?" Derek has been making decisions that bypass the approval procedures that Marcus and I established. More importantly, he's been doing this while arguing that we're too old to understand modern business practices. If he can't follow basic financial controls, how can he claim superior management expertise? Patricia spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents, making notes about specific expenses that couldn't be easily justified through normal project requirements. Her accounting background made her particularly sensitive to patterns that suggested either incompetence or deliberate financial manipulation. "Anthony, I think these concerns warrant further investigation. As a board member, I have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that company resources are being managed properly, regardless of who's making the decisions. Would you object if I conducted a more comprehensive audit of Derek's authorized expenses?" "Patricia, that's exactly what I was hoping you'd suggest. Our shareholders and employees deserve to know that company resources are being managed responsibly, regardless of who's making the decisions." I left Patricia's office knowing that she would discover additional financial irregularities as she conducted a deeper investigation. Derek had been sloppy with his expense authorizations, probably assuming that no one would question decisions made by the future owner of the company. His arrogance had created a paper trail that would be difficult to explain or defend. My next call was to Michael Harrison, our most experienced project manager and someone whose judgment was respected throughout the construction industry. Michael had been with Wellington Castellano for 18 years, managing some of our most complex projects, and his opinion carried weight with both employees and clients. "Michael, I need your honest assessment of Derek's performance on the projects he's been managing. Off the record, just between us."
Michael was quiet for several seconds, probably considering the political implications of criticizing the boss's son. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the careful diplomacy of someone navigating dangerous workplace dynamics. Anthony, Derek is smart and he has good ideas about technology integration, but he doesn't have the practical experience to manage complex projects without constant supervision. I've been covering for mistakes that could have cost us some serious money with clients. What kind of mistakes? Scheduling errors that would have delayed completion deadlines, material orders that didn't account for delivery logistics, cost estimates that ignored seasonal price fluctuations, the kinds of things that you learn through experience, not from textbooks.
Michael's assessment confirmed what I had suspected. Derek's theoretical knowledge wasn't translating into practical competence, and experienced staff members were quietly managing around his deficiencies to protect project outcomes. Michael, if Derek were given complete operational control, what would happen to our project management capabilities? Honestly, we'd probably lose clients within 6 months. Derek doesn't understand the human element of construction management. He treats subcontractors like software programs, input specifications, and expect perfect output. But construction projects require constant adaptation, relationship management, and practical problem-solving that can't be programmed or predicted. Michael's evaluation provided additional evidence that Derek's claims about modernizing company operations were based on academic theory rather than practical expertise. More importantly, it confirmed that our experienced staff members had serious concerns about Derek's leadership capabilities. That afternoon, I implemented the second phase of my strategy by calling our 3 biggest clients to schedule individual meetings to discuss upcoming changes in company leadership structure. I wanted to gauge their confidence in Derek's capabilities and document their concerns about potential operational changes. The first meeting was with Robert Morrison, owner of Morrison Hotels and the client for our current $12 million renovation project. Morrison was a successful businessman who had built his hospitality empire through careful attention to project management and vendor relationships. "Anthony, I have to be honest," Morrison said after I explained the potential leadership changes. "Derek seems like a bright young man, but I haven't seen evidence that he understands the complexities of large-scale renovation projects. When we've had issues that required immediate decisions, I've been calling you or Marcus directly because Derek's responses seemed theoretical." Morrison's comment was particularly significant because the hotel renovation project was the cornerstone of Derek's argument about modern management requirements. If our most important client lacked confidence in Derek's capabilities, it undermined the entire justification for forced leadership changes. "What specific concerns do you have about Derek's project management approach?" I asked. "He focuses on technology solutions without understanding practical constraints. Last month, when we discovered structural complications that required design modifications, Derek wanted to delay the project by 3 weeks to recalculate everything digitally. You solved the same problem in 2 days by bringing in the right subcontractor and adapting the timeline intelligently." Morrison's example perfectly illustrated the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical expertise. Derek's instinct was to rely on digital analysis and procedural compliance, while experience had taught me that complex problems often require creative solutions that can't be programmed or predicted. The meetings with our other major clients produced similar feedback: respect for Derek's intelligence and education, but concern about his practical capabilities and lack of relationship management skills. None of our clients had specifically requested Derek's involvement in their projects, and several had specifically asked to work with me or Marcus when complex issues arose. By the end of the week, I had assembled a comprehensive case that would demolish Derek's claims about superior management capabilities and the necessity of forced leadership changes.
Patricia's financial audit had revealed multiple examples of questionable expense authorizations. Michael Harrison's project assessment had documented operational concerns from our most experienced staff members. Client feedback had demonstrated that Derek lacked the practical expertise required to manage complex construction projects. But I wasn't ready to reveal this information yet. Derek had threatened to use age-related competency challenges against me, which meant he was prepared to fight dirty. My response needed to be devastating enough to end the conflict permanently, while protecting Marcus from the personal destruction that would result from a prolonged family battle. On Friday morning, I received the call I had been expecting. Marcus asked to meet me for lunch to discuss recent developments in our partnership situation. His voice carried a tone of resignation that suggested Derek had been pressuring me to finalize the forced buyout agreement despite our dinner conversation. We met at Giuseppe's again, the same corner booth where we had shared 40 years of business celebrations and personal conversations. Marcus looked exhausted, older than his 73 years, and I could see the toll that Derek's manipulation campaign was taking on his health and emotional well-being. "Tony, Derek is insisting that we finalize your buyout agreement by Monday. He's threatening to call a board meeting to vote on restructuring measures if you continue to resist the transition." "And what do you think about Derek's ultimatum?" Marcus stared into his wine glass, his voice barely audible when he responded. "I think I'm caught between my son's ambitions and my respect for our partnership. Derek says that if I don't support the buyout, he'll resign from the company and tell everyone that we're too stubborn to adapt to modern business requirements."
Derek's ultimatum revealed the emotional manipulation he was using against his father, threatening to abandon the family business unless Marcus betrayed his partner of 40 years. It was psychological extortion designed to force Marcus to choose between his relationship with his son and his loyalty to our partnership.
"Marcus, Derek is giving you a false choice. He's not threatening to leave because he cares about the company's future. He's threatening to leave because he knows that you'll sacrifice our partnership to prevent him from abandoning you." "But what if he's right about us being too old for this business? What if our clients really do need younger leadership with modern expertise?" I leaned forward, speaking with the intensity of someone fighting for 4 decades of friendship and shared accomplishment. "Marcus, I spent this week talking to our clients, our employees, and our accountant about Derek's performance and capabilities. Would you like to know what I discovered?" For the next 30 minutes, I presented the evidence I had gathered: Patricia's concerns about financial irregularities, Michael's assessment of Derek's project management deficiencies, and client feedback about their confidence in his capabilities. I showed Marcus documentation of expense overruns, scheduling mistakes, and operational problems that Derek had created while claiming superior management expertise. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression shifting from resignation to confusion to growing anger as he realized how thoroughly Derek had been manipulating both of us. The evidence revealed not just Derek's incompetence, but his dishonesty in claiming that age was the primary obstacle to effective company management. "Tony, why didn't you tell me about these problems earlier?" "Because I hoped Derek would learn from his mistakes and grow into the role he wanted. But when he threatened me with competency challenges and gave you ultimatums about choosing between him and our partnership, I realized we were dealing with someone who values personal ambition more than family relationships or business integrity." Marcus picked up the financial documents Patricia had prepared, studying expense authorizations that violated every fiscal control procedure we had established. "Derek authorized these payments without board approval?" "Derek has been operating under the assumption that he already controls the company. He's been making decisions that ignore established procedures while arguing that we're too old to understand modern business practices." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of what I had shown him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of disappointment and betrayal that comes from discovering that someone you trusted has been systematically deceiving you. Tony, what do you want me to do? Derek is still my son, even if he's made serious mistakes. I want you to remember who we are and what we built together. Derek can learn to be a valuable employee if he's willing to accept responsibility for his mistakes and earn advancement through performance. But he can't be allowed to steal our company based on lies about our capabilities. Marcus nodded slowly, his business instincts overriding his paternal emotions as he recognized the necessity of protecting what we had spent 4 decades building. How do we handle this situation without destroying my relationship with Derek? We give Derek an opportunity to prove himself through actual performance on real projects with clear metrics and accountability. If he succeeds, he earns advancement. If he fails, he learns that competence matters more than family connections or academic credentials. That afternoon, Marcus called Derek and requested a meeting to discuss the partnership situation. Derek arrived at the office expecting to finalize his takeover, but instead found himself confronted with evidence of financial irregularities, operational failures, and client concerns about his management capabilities. I wasn't present for their conversation, but Marcus called me that evening to describe Derek's response to being confronted with documented evidence of his mistakes and dishonesty. Tony, Derek claimed that the financial irregularities were necessary modernization expenses, and that the operational problems were caused by resistance from older employees who don't understand contemporary project management. He insisted that client concerns reflected their bias towards traditional approaches rather than objective evaluation of his capabilities. Derek's response was entirely predictable: deflect responsibility, blame others, and maintain his claims about superior knowledge despite contradictory evidence. He had learned nothing from being confronted with the consequences of his decisions and showed no willingness to acknowledge mistakes or accept accountability. "What did you tell him?" I asked. I told him that the buyout offer was withdrawn and that he needed to prove his capabilities through successful project management before any discussions about increased authority. I also told him that if he continued to threaten you or try to manipulate board votes, I would support whatever legal action you decided to pursue. Marcus's decision represented a crucial victory, but I knew Derek wouldn't accept this setback gracefully. His threat to use competency challenges against me suggested he was prepared to fight dirty, and desperate people often become more dangerous when their initial plans fail. On Monday morning, Derek requested a meeting with me, James Morrison, and Harold Brennan to discuss what he called resolution of partnership disputes through proper legal channels. His tone was coldly professional, suggesting he had spent the weekend developing a more aggressive strategy.
The meeting took place in Morrison's conference room, with Derek accompanied by an attorney I didn't recognize, a woman in her 40s who specialized in corporate law and partnership disputes. Her presence indicated that Derek had decided to escalate the conflict beyond family disagreement into formal legal confrontation. "Anthony," Derek began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed he held superior legal position. "My attorney has reviewed the Founders Protection Clause that Harold presented, and we believe there are grounds to challenge its current validity based on subsequent agreement modifications and changes in partnership structure." Steinberg's attorney, who introduced herself as Rebecca Steinberg, opened a briefcase filled with legal documents and corporate precedents. The Founders Protection Clause was written in 1983 for a simple 2-person partnership. The company has since evolved into a complex corporate structure with multiple board members, varied operational responsibilities, and sophisticated governance requirements that the original clause couldn't have anticipated. Steinberg's argument was legally sophisticated but fundamentally flawed. She was claiming that corporate evolution invalidated original partnership protections, but Connecticut law doesn't work that way when specific clauses remain unaddressed in subsequent agreements. Harold listened to their presentation without apparent concern, occasionally making notes but showing no indication that their legal arguments posed serious threats to my position. When Steinberg finished her presentation, Harold opened his own briefcase and pulled out additional documents I hadn't seen before. "Rebecca, your argument about corporate evolution is interesting, but it ignores several key legal precedents in Connecticut partnership law," Harold said in his characteristically calm tone. "More importantly, it ignores additional protections that Anthony's position includes beyond the Founder's Protection Clause." Harold distributed copies of what he called fiduciary duty documentation, a legal concept I didn't fully understand, but that clearly concerned both Derek and his attorney. "Anthony has been an active, contributing partner in this business for 40 years. Any attempt to force him out without just cause would constitute breach of fiduciary duty by other partners, potentially creating personal liability for damages that could exceed the value of his partnership stake." Steinberg studied the documents Harold had provided, her expression becoming increasingly worried as she recognized legal complications that Derek probably hadn't anticipated. "This would significantly increase the risks associated with forced partnership restructuring," she said. Harold smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just played another winning card. "Moreover, if Derek's competency challenges against Anthony prove unfounded, which they will, given Anthony's continued active involvement in successful project management, such challenges could constitute defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, creating additional personal liability." The legal momentum had shifted completely in my favor. Derek's threats about competency challenges had become legal vulnerabilities that could destroy him personally if he pursued them without ironclad evidence. His attorney was clearly advising him to reconsider his aggressive approach. "Derek," I said, speaking directly to him for the first time during the meeting, "you have a choice. You can continue pursuing legal strategies that will likely fail while destroying your relationship with your father and damaging the company's reputation, or you can accept the opportunity Marcus offered, prove your capabilities through actual performance, and earn advancement the way everyone else in this industry has to." His response revealed exactly what kind of person he really was. "Anthony, I don't need to prove anything to you. I have the education, the technical knowledge, and the vision to modernize this company. The only thing standing in my way is your stubborn refusal to acknowledge that your time is over." His arrogance was breathtaking. Despite being confronted with evidence of financial irregularities, operational failures, client concerns, and legal vulnerabilities, Derek maintained his belief that he deserved control of our company without earning it through performance or accountability. "Derek, I think you should listen to your attorney's advice about the legal risks you're assuming. Partnership disputes can become very expensive and personally destructive for everyone involved." Steinberg whispered something to Derek, probably advising him to accept the compromise that Marcus had offered, rather than pursuing legal strategies that were unlikely to succeed. But Derek's expression made it clear that he wouldn't accept any outcome that didn't give him immediate control of the company. "We'll be in touch," Derek said, standing up and gathering his documents. "This isn't over." After Derek and his attorney left, Harold turned to me with an expression of concern mixed with admiration. "Tony, you've positioned yourself very well legally, but that young man is going to be dangerous. People who can't accept defeat gracefully sometimes resort to strategies that go beyond legal disputes."
Harold's warning proved prophetic. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek launched a campaign designed to damage both my reputation and the company's operational effectiveness. He contacted our subcontractors, suggesting that leadership changes were imminent and that existing contracts might be modified. He spread rumors among industry contacts that I was experiencing age-related cognitive decline. He even contacted our insurance providers, questioning whether our current leadership was capable of managing the risks associated with major construction projects. Each of Derek's actions was carefully calculated to create doubt about my capabilities, while positioning himself as the inevitable solution to problems he was actively creating. It was a sophisticated psychological warfare campaign that demonstrated exactly how dangerous ambitious incompetence could become when combined with personal ruthlessness. But Derek had made a crucial strategic error. He had forgotten that I had spent 4 decades building relationships throughout the construction industry. Subcontractors who had worked with me for years weren't easily convinced that age had suddenly made me incompetent. Insurance providers who had profited from our excellent safety record weren't impressed by theoretical concerns about leadership changes. Industry contacts who had seen me successfully manage complex projects dismissed rumors about cognitive decline as obvious manipulation. More importantly, Derek's campaign against me was also damaging his father's reputation and the company's standing in the business community. People began questioning Marcus's judgment for allowing his son to create such destructive controversy, and several potential clients postponed project discussions until the leadership instability was resolved. The situation reached a crisis point when Patricia Chen called to inform me that Derek had attempted to convince her to support a board resolution questioning my mental competency. Anthony, Derek scheduled a private meeting where he presented what he called evidence of age-related decision-making problems. He wanted me to support a board vote requiring you to undergo psychological evaluation. What kind of evidence? Examples of times when you had asked questions about new technology or requested clarification about regulatory changes. Derek claimed these were signs of cognitive decline, but they looked like normal responses to unfamiliar information to me. Patricia's description revealed how desperate Derek had become. He was trying to transform normal learning behavior into evidence of mental incompetence, probably hoping that board members would accept his interpretation without critical analysis. Patricia, what did you tell Derek? I told him that asking questions about unfamiliar topics demonstrates intellectual curiosity, not cognitive decline, and that I wouldn't support any board action based on such flimsy evidence. I also told him that his behavior was creating serious concerns about his own judgment and professionalism. Patricia's refusal to support Derek's competency challenge was a devastating setback to his strategy, but it also meant he would become even more desperate and potentially more dangerous. People who are losing control sometimes resort to increasingly extreme measures to achieve their objectives. That evening, Marcus called to inform me that Derek had given him an ultimatum: either support the competency challenge against me, or Derek would resign from the company and pursue legal action claiming that we had discriminated against him based on age bias, favoring older workers. Tony, Derek is threatening to destroy everything we've built unless I help him steal your share of the company. I don't know how to handle this situation anymore. Marcus's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been manipulated and threatened by his own son for months. Derek's ultimatum was designed to force his father to choose between betraying his partner and losing his relationship with his child, a form of emotional extortion that revealed the depth of Derek's narcissism and ruthlessness. Marcus, Derek is betting that your love for him is stronger than your integrity and your respect for our partnership. He's counting on you to sacrifice me to preserve your relationship with him. But if I don't support him, I might lose my son forever. Marcus, you lost your son when he decided to steal our company through lies, manipulation, and threats. The person who's giving you these ultimatums isn't the son you raised. He's someone who values personal ambition more than family relationships or ethical behavior. The conversation with Marcus lasted nearly 2 hours as I helped him understand that Derek's ultimatums were designed to manipulate his emotions, and that giving in to extortion would only encourage more extreme demands in the future. By the end of our call, Marcus had reached the painful conclusion that supporting Derek's unethical behavior would destroy both our partnership and Derek's character development. The next morning, Marcus called a board meeting to address what he described as serious concerns about unprofessional behavior and potential ethical violations.
Derek attended, expecting to present his competency challenge against me, but instead found himself confronted with a comprehensive presentation about his financial irregularities, operational failures, and manipulation campaign. Marcus presented evidence that Patricia, Michael Harrison, and our clients had provided, documenting Derek's incompetence, dishonesty, and destructive behavior towards other employees and business relationships. The presentation was devastating because it was based entirely on objective evidence, rather than personal opinions or family conflicts.
Derek has violated company policies, exceeded his authority, and engaged in behavior that damages our reputation and threatens our client relationships, Marcus concluded. As a board, we need to decide whether Wellington Castellano Construction will tolerate this level of unprofessional conduct from any employee, regardless of family connections. Derek's response was predictable. He blamed everyone else for the problems he had created and claimed that the evidence against him was fabricated by people who resented his superior capabilities and modern approaches to business management. But his explanations couldn't account for the documented financial irregularities or the client feedback about his performance deficiencies. James Morrison, who had initially supported Derek's restructuring plans, was clearly disturbed by the evidence of unethical behavior and operational incompetence. "Derek, these financial irregularities represent serious violations of fiduciary responsibility. Regardless of your intentions, you've exceeded your authority and created liability exposure for the company." The board vote was unanimous. Derek's employment with Wellington Castellano Construction was terminated immediately, and all his corporate access was revoked, pending completion of a comprehensive audit of his financial authorizations and operational decisions. Derek's reaction to being fired revealed the true nature of his character. Instead of accepting responsibility for his mistakes or expressing regret for the damage he had caused, he threatened to sue the company for age discrimination and to expose what he claimed were unethical business practices that Marcus and I had engaged in for decades. "You think you've won," Derek said, his voice filled with rage and desperation. "But I know things about this company's operations that could destroy both of you. I have evidence of bid manipulation, safety violations, and tax evasion that goes back years." Derek's threats were hollow bluster, designed to intimidate us into reconsidering his termination, but they also revealed how completely he had misunderstood the nature of our business practices. Wellington Castellano Construction had succeeded for 40 years precisely because we maintained the highest ethical standards and operational integrity. Derek had never understood that our reputation was built on delivering superior results through honest business practices. "Derek," I said calmly, "if you have evidence of unethical behavior, I encourage you to present it to whatever authorities you think would be interested. But before you make accusations you can't support, remember that defamation lawsuits can be very expensive for people who make false claims." Derek left the building that day, carrying a box of personal belongings and a termination package that was more generous than his performance warranted. Marcus had insisted on providing severance pay and extended health insurance, despite Derek's threats and unprofessional behavior, a gesture of parental love that Derek didn't deserve, but that demonstrated Marcus's character even in the face of personal betrayal. The aftermath of Derek's departure was remarkably positive for everyone involved. Our employees were relieved to be free from the toxic atmosphere that Derek's manipulation campaign had created. Our clients were pleased to learn that experienced leadership would continue managing their projects without interference from unproven management theories. Our subcontractors and vendors appreciated the return to straightforward business relationships based on mutual respect and reliable performance. Most importantly, Marcus and I were able to restore the partnership that had been our foundation for 40 years. The experience with Derek had reminded both of us why our collaboration had been so successful. We trusted each other's judgment, we communicated honestly about challenges and opportunities, and we shared a commitment to excellence that went beyond personal ambition or financial considerations. 6 months later, Wellington Castellano Construction was performing better than it had in years. The Morrison Hotel renovation was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, earning us a bonus payment and a commendation for exceptional project management. We had signed 3 new major contracts based on client referrals and industry recognition of our capabilities. Our financial performance was the strongest it had been since the 2008 recession. Derek never filed the lawsuits he had threatened, probably because his attorney advised him that his claims lacked merit and would likely result in countersuit for defamation and attempted extortion. He eventually found employment with a competitor, where his theoretical knowledge and academic credentials might be more valued than the practical competence that our industry demands. Marcus and I never discussed Derek's attempted theft of our company in detail after his termination. Some betrayals are too painful to analyze extensively, especially when they involve family relationships that have been permanently damaged. But Marcus occasionally expressed gratitude that I had been patient enough to document Derek's incompetence and ethical violations, rather than simply responding to his threats with immediate legal action. Tony, Derek could have learned to be a valuable contributor if he had been willing to start small and earn advancement through performance, but he wanted everything handed to him immediately, without accountability or consequences.
But most importantly, I learned that Elena had been right about the importance of legal protections in business partnerships. Her insistence on including the Founders' Protection Clause and our original 1983 agreement had seemed unnecessary at the time, but it ultimately saved me from losing everything I had worked 40 years to build. Today, at 72 years old, I continue to manage complex construction projects with the same energy and competence that built Wellington Castellano Construction into one of the most respected companies in Connecticut. Our reputation attracts the kind of clients who value experience, integrity, and proven results over theoretical innovation or academic credentials. Marcus and I have begun genuine succession planning, identifying and training employees who have demonstrated both technical competence and ethical character through years of reliable performance. When we do eventually retire, it will be on our own terms, transferring control to people who have earned advancement through merit rather than manipulation. Derek's attempt to steal our company failed because he underestimated the value of experience, overestimated the power of manipulation, and forgot that success in business requires character as well as ambition. He learned too late that age brings not obsolescence, but strategic advantages that wise people learn to use against those who underestimate them. The most satisfying aspect of this entire experience was proving that Anthony Castellano, at 71 years old, was still sharp enough to outthink, outmaneuver, and ultimately defeat an opponent who assumed that age made me vulnerable to exploitation. Derek discovered what many others had learned over the decades. Underestimating Anthony Castellano is always a costly mistake. As Elena used to say, Tony, the best revenge against people who try to steal what you've earned is simply continuing to succeed at levels they could never achieve themselves. Derek wanted our company because he thought it would give him success and respect that he couldn't earn through his own efforts. Instead, he learned that success requires qualities that can't be inherited, stolen, or faked: competence, integrity, and the wisdom that comes from decades of earning what you have through honest work and principled decisions. If you enjoyed this story of justice and triumph, please like this video, subscribe to Prime Revenge, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, age brings not weakness, but strategic advantages that wise people learn to use against those who underestimate them. Until next time, never forget that experience and integrity will always defeat ambition without character.